What if the key to a better life, less stress, more resilience, and unshakable peace of mind has been hidden in plain sight for over 2,000 years? Imagine a philosophy so powerful that it guided emperors, shaped warriors, and still influences some of the most successful people today. This isn't some fleeting self-help trend or modern quick fix. It's Stoicism, an ancient wisdom that's as relevant now as it was in the bustling markets of Athens or the battlefields of Rome. And here's the thing, Stoicism isn't about suppressing emotions or enduring hardship with a stiff upper lip. It's about mastering your mind, transforming obstacles into opportunities, and finding clarity in chaos. Think about the last time life threw you a curveball, a missed opportunity, a frustrating setback, or a moment of overwhelming pressure. What if you could face those moments not with anxiety, but with unshakable calm? That's the promise of Stoicism. Marcus Aurelius, one of history's greatest Stoic thinkers and a Roman emperor, put it perfectly: you have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength. Those words weren't just written for philosophers in togas. They're for anyone who's ever felt tossed around by life's unpredictability. And that's exactly what we're diving into today. 30 powerful Stoic truths that will change how you see the world and your place in it. This video isn't just a history lesson or a collection of quotes. It's a toolkit for modern life. Whether you're struggling with stress, searching for purpose, or just tired of feeling like life happens to you instead of for you, these Stoic principles will shift your perspective in ways you might not expect. We'll explore how to turn fear into fuel, how to focus on what you can control, and why the toughest challenges often hide the greatest gifts. So if you're ready to uncover timeless wisdom that can help you navigate today's chaos with more courage and clarity, you're in the right place. Let's begin. Stoicism teaches that the only thing we truly control is our mind, our thoughts, judgments, and actions. Everything else, the weather, other people's opinions, traffic jams, delays, even our own bodies as they age, falls outside our command. This is the core of what Stoics call the dichotomy of control, a principle so simple yet so revolutionary that it can reshape how you experience life. Epictetus, the former slave who became one of Stoicism's greatest teachers, put it bluntly: some things are within our power while others are not. Within our power are opinion, motivation, desire, and aversion. Outside our power are our body, property, reputation, and status. Think about that for a moment. How much time do we waste agonizing over things we can't change? The job interview that didn't go our way, the rude comment from a stranger, the flight that got cancelled. These events are beyond our control, but our reaction. That's entirely ours to shape. Picture this: you're stuck in bumper-to-bumper traffic, late for an appointment. You can scream at the windshield, grip the steering wheel until your knuckles turn white, and let frustration hijack your mood. Or you can take a deep breath, accept that the traffic won't move faster because you're upset, and choose to listen to an audiobook or reflect on your day. The traffic hasn't changed, but your experience of it has. This isn't about passivity or resignation. It's about redirecting your energy where it actually matters. When you stop fighting external forces and start mastering your internal world, you reclaim an incredible power, the ability to stay steady, no matter what life throws at you. So ask yourself, when was the last time you stressed over something you couldn't control? What would change if, instead of resisting it, you focused only on your response? That shift alone can turn frustration into freedom. Seneca, the great Stoic philosopher, once observed that we suffer more in imagination than in reality. Those 7 words hold a truth so profound it can alter your entire relationship with hardship. Here's why. The stories we tell ourselves about events, not the events themselves, are what truly shape our suffering. A job rejection isn't just a no, it becomes proof we're inadequate. A minor disagreement spirals into a narrative of being unappreciated. The irony. Often, the actual event passes quickly, while the mental replay we torture ourselves with lingers for hours, even days. Modern psychology confirms what Stoics knew centuries ago: anxiety thrives on projection. When we fixate on what ifs, we're living through disasters that haven't happened and likely never will. Picture 2 people stuck in the same traffic jam. One seethes, convinced the universe is against them. The other sighs, then calls a friend to catch up. Same delay, radically different experiences. The difference. Perception. The Stoics called this the discipline of assent, the practice of questioning whether your initial judgment of a situation is accurate or just a knee-jerk reaction. Try this reframing exercise. The next time a negative thought hijacks your mind, pause and ask, is this fact or interpretation? If your coworker didn't reply to your email, is it because they're ignoring you, or are they swamped, distracted, or simply waiting to craft a thoughtful response? The moment you challenge assumptions, you reclaim agency. Marcus Aurelius kept a journal to interrogate his perceptions, writing, "Today I shall be meeting with interference, ingratitude, insolence, disloyalty. But here's the twist," he followed it with, "None of these things can injure me, for I can choose not to be harmed." What if you stopped viewing obstacles as setbacks and started seeing them as training grounds? Every frustration becomes a chance to practice patience. Every criticism is an opportunity to filter useful feedback from noise. Even pain can be a teacher. Seneca wrote letters on the virtues of illness while battling chronic health issues. When a challenge arises, ask yourself, what strength could this moment help me develop? That shift doesn't just ease suffering, it transforms you. Amor Fati, Latin for love of fate, isn't just a Stoic idea, it's a radical way of living. Friedrich Nietzsche, the philosopher who famously declared, "What doesn't kill me makes me stronger," borrowed this concept directly from the Stoics. But what does it mean to love your fate, especially when life hands you disappointment, loss, or outright failure? It's not about grinning through pain or pretending hardship doesn't hurt. It's about recognizing that every event, no matter how unwelcome, becomes part of your story, and choosing to see it as fuel rather than ruin. Marcus Aurelius put it best, "The impediment to action advances action. What stands in the way becomes the way." Take the Stoic philosopher Musonius Rufus, banished to a barren island by Emperor Nero. Instead of crumbling, he turned exile into a classroom, teaching philosophy to anyone who would listen. The very punishment meant to silence him amplified his voice. Centuries later, Viktor Frankl, a Holocaust survivor and psychiatrist, would echo this Stoic resilience in his book Man's Search for Meaning, writing that even in Auschwitz, he could choose his response. That's Amor Fati in action. When you stop asking, "Why me?" and start asking, "What now?" Here's the secret: adversity doesn't just test you, it reveals you. A shattered business venture teaches resourcefulness. A broken heart deepens empathy. A missed train forces you to slow down and notice the world. The Stoics didn't deny suffering, they reframed it as a chisel, shaping you into someone wiser and tougher. So think of a recent setback, a rejection, a mistake, a plan gone awry. What if it wasn't a detour but the exact path you needed? What strength could it be nudging you to develop? Amor Fati isn't passive acceptance, it's active transformation. The moment you stop resisting reality and start working with it, you unlock a kind of freedom that no circumstance can take away. The Stoics didn't just endure obstacles, they embraced them. This mindset is captured perfectly in the title of Ryan Holiday's modern Stoic classic, The Obstacle is the Way. At first glance, it sounds like a contradiction. How can a roadblock become a path? But this isn't just motivational wordplay. It's a radical reframing of adversity, one that Epictetus summed up centuries ago. Every difficulty in life presents us with an opportunity to turn inward and to invoke our own submerged inner resources. In other words, the very thing blocking you might be the exact tool you need to break through. Take the story of a struggling tech startup. After their flagship product failed spectacularly, the team could have dissolved into blame or given up entirely. Instead, they studied every flaw in their design, realizing their failure had revealed a gap in the market no one else had noticed. That pivot led to an innovation that made them industry leaders. The obstacle, their collapsed first venture, became the way forward. This isn't luck or coincidence. It's the Stoic practice of turning the thing that hurts you into the thing that helps you. Here's how it works. Challenges force us to dig deeper, think creatively, and adapt in ways comfort never could. A musician with a damaged hand learns to compose instead of perform, discovering a talent for songwriting. A writer rejected by publishers starts a blog, building an audience that later demands her work. Even nature follows this principle. Forest fires clear dead wood, allowing new growth to thrive. The Stoics saw this pattern everywhere. Setbacks aren't interruptions to your journey, they're part of the journey. So think about a hurdle you're facing right now: a strained relationship, a financial pinch, a project that's stalled. What if it's not holding you back but pointing you toward an untapped skill, a needed course correction, or a hidden strength? The obstacle asks you a question: will you let it stop you, or will you let it shape you? That choice determines whether you see life's interruptions as walls or doors. And here's the truth: the door is always there. You just have to push. Death is the only certainty. This isn't morbid, it's liberating. The Stoics called this practice Memento Mori, remembering that your time is finite. Seneca wrote, "You act like mortals in all that you fear, and like immortals in all that you desire." We procrastinate, assuming we'll have decades to chase dreams, mend relationships, or start that project. But what if today were your last? This question isn't meant to paralyze you with dread. It's a wake-up call to strip away trivialities and focus on what truly matters. Consider how differently you'd move through today if you knew it was your final one. Would you scroll mindlessly or call someone you love? Would you obsess over a minor slight or let it go with a laugh? The Stoics didn't dwell on death to depress themselves. They used it as a tool to magnify life's value. Marcus Aurelius kept a skull on his desk not as a grim decoration, but as a reminder. This could be your last conversation, your last sunset, your last chance to be kind. Modern life bombards us with distractions, endless notifications, shallow busyness, the illusion that there's always tomorrow. But the Stoics knew better. Epictetus told his students, "Keep death and exile before your eyes every day, for then you will never have a base thought nor desire anything beyond measure." When you internalize that life is fleeting, you stop wasting energy on what doesn't serve you. Petty arguments lose their sting, material cravings fade. You start measuring time not in hours, but in moments that resonate. Here's the paradox: embracing mortality doesn't shrink your life, it expands it. A study of hospice patients found their top regrets centered on unexpressed love, unmet dreams, and time lost to conformity. The Stoics anticipated this 20 centuries earlier. Their solution: live now as if you're already looking back. When you sit down to dinner, really taste the food. When you hug someone, let it linger. When you work, pour yourself into it completely. Death isn't waiting at the end, it's walking beside you, whispering, "Don't wait." So ask yourself, what have you been postponing? What trivialities have you mistaken for priorities? And most importantly, what would change if you stopped pretending you have forever? The clock is ticking, yes, but that's what makes every second sacred. What if the secret to strength wasn't avoiding hardship, but seeking it? The Stoics called this voluntary discomfort, and it might be the most counterintuitive tool in their toolkit. Picture Cato the Younger, the Roman senator who embodied Stoic principles, deliberately wearing tattered robes in public. In an era where status was displayed through lavish clothing, he chose rags, not because he couldn't afford better, but to remind himself that comfort wasn't a requirement for dignity. This wasn't about martyrdom or self-punishment, it was training. By willingly stepping into minor hardships, he inoculated himself against life's inevitable blows. Modern science backs this ancient practice. When you intentionally expose yourself to discomfort, whether it's skipping a meal, taking a cold shower, or walking instead of driving, you rewire your brain's response to stress. Navy SEAL endure brutal training not because they'll face non-stop suffering in the field, but because when real chaos hits, their minds default to resilience, not panic. The Stoics understood this instinctively. Seneca, one of Rome's wealthiest men, regularly slept on the floor and ate meager meals. Why? To prove to himself that happiness wasn't tied to luxury. In his words, set aside a certain number of days to be content with the scantiest and cheapest fare, saying to yourself the whole while, "Is this the condition I feared?" Here's the magic. Voluntary discomfort doesn't just harden you, it liberates you. When you realize you can thrive without constant convenience, you break the chains of dependency. Ever notice how a power outage suddenly makes you appreciate candles, conversation, and stillness? That's Stoicism in action. Modern minimalism echoes this idea, owning less to live more, choosing experiences over accumulations. Even intermittent fasting, a trend today, mirrors the Stoic practice of mastering cravings to prove they don't master you. So here's a challenge. Pick one small discomfort this week. Leave your phone behind for a day. Take the stairs instead of the elevator. Sit with boredom instead of reaching for distraction. Notice what happens when you step off the treadmill of constant comfort. At first, it might feel like deprivation, but soon you'll uncover something profound. The less you need, the more resilient you become. And in that resilience lies a freedom no external circumstance can shake. The Stoics didn't chase suffering, they chased sovereignty over their own happiness. And that's a power worth practicing for. Ryan Holiday didn't just title his book "Ego is the Enemy" for dramatic effect. He was channeling a truth the Stoics hammered home 2,000 years earlier. Unchecked ego isn't just a flaw, it's a trap. Marcus Aurelius, the most powerful man in Rome, wrote in his private journal, "Stop letting yourself be pulled like a puppet by ego-driven desires for praise." Think about that, an emperor surrounded by yes men and sycophants, reminding himself daily that external validation is a hollow pursuit. Why? Because the Stoics understood that ego clouds judgment, inflates blind spots, and turns minor stumbles into catastrophic falls. History is littered with cautionary tales of talent undone by arrogance. Take a celebrated athlete who, after years of dominance, begins believing their own hype. They dismiss coaches, cut corners, and alienate teammates only to watch their career crumble under avoidable mistakes. The downfall wasn't lack of skill, it was the inability to separate ability from identity. Seneca warned, "No one is crushed by fortune unless they are first deceived by her favors." Success, the Stoics argued, is most dangerous when it feeds the illusion that you're immune to failure. Ego doesn't just distort how we see ourselves, It warps how we engage with the world. Ever doubled down on a bad decision because admitting a mistake felt like weakness? That's ego masquerading as pride, or clung to a grudge because apologizing felt like surrender. Ego again, prioritizing winning over growth. Even the urge to dominate conversations or dismiss feedback stems from the same root, a fragile self-image that confuses being right with being worthy. Here's the paradox: humility, in the Stoic sense, isn't about self-deprecation, it's about clear-eyed self-assessment. Epictetus, who taught from a position of lifelong disability and former enslavement, put it bluntly: if you want to improve, be content to be thought foolish. Real growth demands acknowledging what you don't know. Consider the CEO who regularly seeks critiques from junior employees, or the artist who revisits early work to remember how far they've come. These aren't acts of weakness, they're signs of strength. So where might your ego be whispering lies? In that resentment toward a colleague's promotion? In the defensiveness when someone corrects you? Or maybe in the reluctance to try something new because you'd rather be skilled than seen as a beginner? The antidote is Stoic prosouch attention to your inner dialogue. Before making a decision, ask, is this choice driven by genuine purpose or by the need to appear a certain way? Ego loves costumes, strip them away, and what's left is the raw material of real progress. Seneca called anger temporary madness, a fire that burns the hand of the one who carries it. The Stoics didn't just discourage anger, they saw it as a fundamental failure of reason, a surrender to impulses that cloud judgment and corrode character. Think about the last time rage hijacked you. Maybe it was a cutting remark during an argument or a simmering resentment over a perceived slight. In that heated moment, did anger solve anything, or did it amplify the problem? The Stoic answer is blunt. Anger is weakness disguised as strength. History offers glaring examples of this truth. Take Alexander the Great, a military genius who conquered empires, yet in a drunken rage, he killed Cleitus, his closest friend and the man who'd once saved his life in battle. One outburst erased years of loyalty, leaving Alexander racked with guilt. Contrast this with the restraint of George Washington, who trained himself to pause 15 seconds before responding to provocation. That brief gap between stimulus and response, that's where Stoic wisdom lies. Anger tricks us into believing we're taking control when we're actually losing it. A driver cuts you off and your pulse spikes. A coworker takes credit for your idea and your jaw clenches. But here's the Stoic reframe: those people aren't causing your anger, your judgment about their actions is. Epictetus taught, it's not what happens to you, but how you react that matters. When you react with fury, you hand your power to whoever provoked you. Calmness, on the other hand, is sovereignty. Imagine two chefs whose orders get sent back. One smashes plates, screaming at the staff. The other reviews the dishes, identifies oversights, and retrains the team. Both face the same problem, but only one solves it. Anger is like throwing a rock into a machine. It might feel satisfying in the moment, but it only breaks things further. The Stoics practiced apatheia, not apathy, but freedom from destructive passions. They channeled energy into analysis, not outbursts. Next time anger flares, try this 3-step Stoic intervention. First, pause, literally step back or count breaths. Second, assess, ask, will this matter in a week, a year? Third, redirect, channel the energy into a constructive action. Maybe it's a firm but calm conversation, or simply choosing to walk away. As Seneca wrote, the greatest remedy for anger is delay. That space between trigger and action, that's where your real power lies. Anger shouts, wisdom whispers. Which voice will you amplify? Epictetus, born into slavery and later becoming one of Stoicism's most revered teachers, had a perspective on wealth that would stop most of us in our tracks. Wealth consists not in having great possessions, but in having few wants. This wasn't just poetic wisdom, it was a radical challenge to the very foundation of how we measure success. Think about the last time you scrolled through social media, bombarded by images of luxury cars, designer wardrobes, and sprawling mansions. Now ask yourself, how many of those things would truly make you happier versus how many are just props in a performance of status? The Stoics called wealth a preferred indifferent, meaning it's neither good nor bad in itself, but gains value only through how we use it. A hammer can build a house or smash a window. Wealth can fund education or fuel greed. The difference isn't in the tool, but in the hand that wields it. Consider the paradox of modern materialism. We chase bigger paychecks to buy more things, only to find ourselves working longer hours to maintain lifestyles that leave us exhausted. The average person today owns far more than a medieval king, yet stress, anxiety, and dissatisfaction are at all-time highs. Why? Because we've confused means with ends. Money isn't the destination, it's fuel for the journey. The Stoics didn't reject wealth, they rejected dependency on it. Seneca, despite his fortune, wrote, "It is not the man who has too little who is poor, but the one who craves more." That craving is the real poverty. Imagine two people inheriting the same sum. One blows it on fleeting pleasures, ending up emptier than before. The other uses it to learn a skill, start a business, or support a cause. The money didn't change, their relationship to it did. This is the heart of the Stoic view. Wealth is freedom only when it serves purpose, not vanity. When Steve Jobs returned to Apple in the 90s, he slashed product lines and stripped away clutter, declaring, "Innovation is saying no to 1,000 things." That's Stoic minimalism in action, focusing resources on what truly matters. So here's a question to sit with. What could you subtract from your life to add more meaning? Maybe it's decluttering your space, saying no to mindless consumerism, or redefining success beyond salary digits. When Diogenes, the famous Cynic philosopher whose ideas influenced Stoicism, saw a child drinking water from his hands, he threw away his cup, realizing even that was excess. Extreme, perhaps, but the lesson sticks. The more we need, the more we're chained. The less we require, the richer we become, not in our bank accounts, in our lives. Aristotle famously declared, "We are what we repeatedly do," a truth the Stoics etched into their daily lives through relentless discipline. This isn't about grand gestures or occasional effort. It's the small, consistent actions that forge character. Marcus Aurelius, ruler of an empire, began each morning with a simple ritual. He'd remind himself of the day's inevitable challenges, rude people, distractions, setbacks, and resolve to meet them with patience and purpose. No fanfare, no elaborate preparations, just a mental rehearsal for excellence. His Meditations, now a timeless classic, wasn't written for publication. It was his private habit of reflection, a daily sharpening of his mind like a blade on stone. Consider the power of micro-practices. A musician doesn't master an instrument in one marathon session. They show up daily, even for 20 minutes. Similarly, Stoic resilience isn't built in crisis. It's cultivated in quiet moments. Epictetus, teaching from a humble school in Nicopolis, urged his students to review their days each evening. Where did I act with virtue? Where did fear override reason? This wasn't self-criticism, it was deliberate calibration. Modern research echoes this. Studies on habit formation show that small, consistent actions rewire neural pathways, turning struggle into second nature. Your habits are your architecture. Sleep enough and you'll think clearer. Exercise regularly and stress loses its edge. Journal honestly and self-deception fades. The Stoics didn't rely on motivation, they engineered systems. Seneca wrote letters to friends dissecting his flaws. Zeno, founder of Stoicism, practiced poverty to master desire. These weren't random acts, they were targeted workouts for the soul. Here's the challenge: pick one habit to fortify your resilience. Maybe it's 5 minutes of morning reflection, asking, "What's within my control today?" Perhaps it's pausing before reacting to provocation, creating space between trigger and response. Or it could be as tangible as a weekly digital detox to reclaim focus. The key isn't scale, it's repetition. As Musonius Rufus taught, we become just by doing just things, courageous by doing courageous things. Every time you choose discipline over impulse, you're not just doing a habit, you're becoming the kind of person who doesn't need to think about it. So ask yourself, what tiny daily practice could be your lever to move the world? Because excellence isn't an act, it's a habit wearing grooves so deep, they guide you even when the path gets dark. Empty vessels make the most noise, an ancient proverb that captures a truth the Stoics held sacred. Silence isn't just the absence of words, it's a discipline. Epictetus, the philosopher who turned hardship into wisdom, put it bluntly: "We have 2 ears and 1 mouth so that we can listen twice as much as we speak." In a world that equates volume with value, Stoicism reminds us that real strength often wears quiet. Think about the last heated debate you witnessed, or worse, participated in. Were people truly listening, or just waiting to fire their next verbal shot? Social media has turned discourse into a shouting match, where algorithms reward outrage and brevity trumps depth. But the Stoics practiced something radical. They chose silence over winning arguments, listening over lecturing. Consider the power of withholding speech. A CEO lets her team brainstorm without interjecting, unlocking ideas she'd have stifled by dominating the conversation. A parent stays quiet as their child stumbles through explaining a mistake, creating space for honesty instead of defensiveness. Even nature understands this. Forests grow in stillness, oceans deepen in quiet. The loudest voice in the room is rarely the wisest. Marcus Aurelius, who ruled Rome at its peak, wrote in his private journal, "Ask yourself, does this need to be said? Buy me now 3 filters that could spare us countless regrets." There's a neurological basis for this. When we pause before speaking, the prefrontal cortex, the brain's reasoning center, gains milliseconds to override emotional impulses. That gap is where Stoic restraint lives. Contrast this with our modern reflex to fill every silence with noise. Podcasts playing during commutes, TVs blaring in empty rooms, fingers flying across keyboards to respond to every notification. We've forgotten how to be comfortably quiet, both externally and internally. But here's where Stoic silence transcends mere restraint. It becomes a tool for discernment. Zeno, the founder of Stoicism, famously said nothing for years after losing everything in a shipwreck. That silence wasn't defeat, it was the soil where his philosophy took root. When we stop narrating our lives, we start observing them. A journalist withholding commentary hears nuances in an interview. A negotiator who speaks less controls the room more. Even in conflict, strategic silence can de-escalate where words fan flames. So think back, when has silence served you better than speech? Maybe it was biting your tongue during a provocation, only to realize later how much drama you avoided. Or perhaps it was the unspoken comfort of sitting with a grieving friend, where no words could match the power of presence. The Stoics didn't advocate muteness, they championed intentionality. Every unspoken word is a seed of potential energy. Will you spend it on chatter or invest it in understanding? The choice defines not just your conversations, but your character. Imagine a compass that never fails no matter how stormy life gets. It points unerringly toward true north. For the Stoics, that compass was virtue, not wealth. Not fame, not even happiness itself. They believed virtue, cultivating wisdom, courage, justice, and temperance was the only true good, because everything else could be taken away in an instant. Marcus Aurelius put it plainly: waste no more time arguing what a good man should be one. No debates, no philosophical hair-splitting, just action. Let's break down these 4 cardinal virtues that form the bedrock of Stoic ethics. Wisdom isn't just knowledge, it's the ability to see reality clearly, untangled from biases and emotions. Courage isn't the absence of fear, but the will to act rightly despite it. Justice extends beyond fairness. It's treating others with dignity, recognizing we're all threads in the same human tapestry. And temperance, that's the mastery of desires, the refusal to let cravings for food, for status, for validation dictate your choices. Now, consider how these play out in modern life. A CEO faces pressure to cut corners for profit, but chooses transparency, even at short-term cost. That's justice in action. A nurse working grueling shifts stays compassionate with each patient. That's temperance, tiring exhaustion. Or take someone leaving a toxic relationship despite the fear of loneliness. That's courage overriding comfort. The virtues aren't abstract ideals, they're muscles we strengthen through daily use. Here's the radical part. Stoics argued that if you possess virtue, you lack nothing. Lose your job, you still have integrity. Face slander, your character remains untarnished. Even in poverty or illness, virtue can't be confiscated. It's why Epictetus, born a slave, could say, "No one is free who is not master of himself." External circumstances might bind the body, but only you can surrender your principles. So here's a challenge. Pick one virtue to spotlight this week. Maybe it's wisdom, pausing before reacting to that inflammatory email. Perhaps it's courage, voicing an unpopular but necessary opinion at work. Or temperance, resisting the urge to indulge gossip. Every choice is a brick in the structure of your character. As Seneca wrote, fate leads the willing, drags the unwilling. Virtue isn't about perfection, it's about direction. Which path will your next step take you? Epictetus cut straight to the heart of it. If you want to improve, be content to be thought foolish. Imagine living by that principle, not just nodding along when you hear it, but truly embodying it. How many of your daily choices are shaped by the silent question, what will people think? The clothes you wear to fit in, the opinions you swallow to avoid conflict, even the hobbies you pretend to enjoy because they're cool. The Stoics saw this chase for approval as a cage of our own making. Every time we prioritize others' perceptions over our own growth, we hand them the keys to our happiness. Take social media, the modern arena of validation. That dopamine hit when a post gets likes, it's not harmless. It's training you to outsource your self-worth to strangers. A study found people experience measurable anxiety when their posts don't get enough engagement, as if invisible judges have declared them unworthy. But here's the twist: those judges are just as insecure, posting their own carefully curated highlights, trapped in the same cycle. Marcus Aurelius warned, "It never ceases to amaze me. We all love ourselves more than other people, but care more about their opinion than our own." History's most transformative figures were often ridiculed before they were revered. The Wright brothers were called delusional for dreaming of flight. Rosa Parks was arrested for refusing to move. Their foolishness wasn't a lack of judgment, it was a surplus of conviction. Contrast this with the businessman who climbs the corporate ladder only to realize he's spent decades chasing titles that leave him hollow. Or the artist who abandons their unique style to mimic trends, becoming proficient but forgettable. The irony: those who break free from approval's grip often earn deeper respect precisely because they stop demanding it. So here's a thought experiment. What would you create, wear, or pursue if no one was watching, not as rebellion but as pure self-expression? A writer might pen stories too weird for mainstream publishers but perfect for 3 readers who need them. A parent might raise children guided by values, not neighborhood gossip. Even small acts, singing off-key in the car, wearing mismatched socks, become tiny revolutions against the tyranny of "what will they say?" The Stoic solution isn't to reject all feedback but to filter it through wisdom. Constructive criticism from a trusted mentor, gold; random negativity from someone who doesn't know you. Noise, as Seneca noted, the opinion of the crowd is the very last thing I should consider. Your life isn't a performance reviewed by critics, it's a masterpiece in progress, and the only audience that truly matters is the one you see in the mirror. Stop playing to the crowd and you might just find your voice. Seneca's piercing observation, "Life is long if you know how to use it," shatters the modern illusion that time slips through our fingers. The truth, we don't lack time, we lack intentionality. Picture 2 people given identical clay. One molds it into a masterpiece, the other lets it crumble into dust. Both had the same raw material, what differed was their attention. The Stoics didn't view time as an enemy but as a currency. Every moment spent complaining, scrolling mindlessly, or dwelling on trivial slights is a payment toward a life you didn't choose. Consider the paradox of busyness. We cram calendars with meetings, errands, and obligations, mistaking motion for progress. Yet when asked what truly matters, we point to neglected relationships, abandoned hobbies, or unwritten books. Seneca called this being entangled in the thickets of life, so consumed by the urgent that we forfeit the essential. A CEO might log 80-hour weeks but realize too late they've built a company at the cost of knowing their children. A student might ace every exam while their curiosity withers under the weight of rote memorization. Busyness isn't productivity, it's often just distraction in disguise. Here's the Stoic audit: track your days like an accountant tracks pennies. How many hours vanish into social media's black hole? How much mental space is hijacked by gossip or grievances? Marcus Aurelius kept a journal not to record events, but to scrutinize his choices. Did I spend today on what aligns with my purpose? Modern tools like time-tracking apps reveal similar patterns. Most people squander weeks annually on passive consumption. The realization stings. You've had enough time all along. You just invested it poorly. Now the challenge: ruthless prioritization. Not tomorrow, not someday. This week, identify one habitual time waster that adds no value to your growth or joy. Maybe it's that nightly Netflix binge you don't even enjoy, just habit, or the group chat that devolves into hours of petty drama. Replace it with something that stretches you: reading 10 pages of philosophy, calling an old friend, or practicing a skill. Small shifts compound, as Seneca wrote. While we waste our time hesitating and postponing, life speeds by. You don't need more time, you need fewer leaks. The ultimate question isn't how long you live, but how awake you are while living. An hour spent fully present, whether in conversation, creation, or contemplation, contains more life than years spent on autopilot. Time doesn't discriminate, it gives everyone the same 24 hours. The Stoics whispered a secret across centuries: richness isn't measured in years, but in moments seized. Your clock is ticking. What will you trade for its currency today? Seneca called it premeditatio malorum, the premeditation of evils. At first glance, it sounds pessimistic, even morbid. Why dwell on potential disasters? But here's the Stoic twist. By mentally rehearsing adversity, you strip it of its power to shock or paralyze you. Think of it as emotional vaccination, a small, controlled dose of fear to build immunity against the real thing. Seneca wrote, He robs present ills of their power who has perceived their coming beforehand. Picture a pilot running through emergency procedures before takeoff. They're not expecting disaster, but their calm readiness transforms panic into procedure if turbulence hits. Athletes have mastered this art long before sports psychology made it trendy. A gymnast visualizes every flip, every grip, even the sting of a missed landing, not to invite failure, but to make excellence habitual. Studies show mental rehearsal activates the same neural pathways as physical practice. When the moment comes, the brain recognizes the scenario. I've been here before, even if only in my mind. The Stoics took this further, applying it to life itself. Marcus Aurelius would begin his day by envisioning irritations, rude people, delays, distractions, and resolving to meet them with patience. By expecting life's friction, he reduced its ability to throw him off course. Now consider your own life. What's the worst-case scenario you dread? A job loss, a confrontation, a health scare? Here's the exercise. Play it out in your mind step by step. Not to catastrophize, but to strategize. If your business fails, what skills could you pivot to? If a friendship fractures, what values would guide your response? This isn't about predicting the future. It's about preparing your resilience. When the Roman general Scipio planned battles, he'd ask his officers not just for ideal strategies, but for contingency plans if everything went wrong. That duality, hoping for victory while preparing for setbacks, made his armies unstoppable. So ask yourself, where are you relying on hope alone when preparation could fortify you? The parent who saves a small emergency fund isn't expecting tragedy. They're ensuring they can act, not react, if it comes. The student who practices a speech in front of a mirror isn't assuming they'll forget their lines. They're building confidence that holds steady under pressure. Premeditatio malorum isn't about expecting the worst. It's about knowing you can handle it. And that knowledge, that's the quiet confidence that lets you hope boldly, precisely because you've already faced your fears in the dark. Epictetus, the Stoic philosopher who endured slavery and disability, laid down a truth that still shatters modern illusions. Happiness depends on the quality of your thoughts, not the quality of your circumstances. Let that sink in. We chase promotions, relationships, and possessions, convinced they'll unlock joy, only to find the goalpost keeps moving. The new car smell fades. The thrill of a raise evaporates into routine. Even milestones like weddings or dream vacations become memories, leaving us searching for the next external fix. The Stoics saw this pattern 2,000 years ago. We're looking for happiness in all the wrong places. Neuroscience now confirms what ancient wisdom long asserted. Studies on gratitude practices show that people who regularly reflect on simple blessings, a warm cup of coffee, a child's laughter, sunlight through leaves, experience measurable increases in life satisfaction. Not because their circumstances changed, but because their focus did. Harvard research reveals that material purchases provide fleeting pleasure, while experiences and connections yield lasting contentment. The paradox: you don't need more to be happy, you need to notice more. Consider the billionaire who can't sleep, tormented by stock fluctuations, and the street vendor who whistles as he packs up his cart, grateful for a day's honest work. Who's truly wealthy? Marcus Aurelius, ruling the Roman Empire, wrote, "Very little is needed to make a happy life." Meanwhile, social media bombards us with curated highlight reels designed to manufacture lack. That vacation photo, it doesn't show the arguments over directions or the credit card debt. The Stoic antidote: differentiate between what's shown and what's lived. Here's a challenge. List 3 things you're grateful for right now without mentioning possessions. Maybe it's the way your dog greets you like you're the only person in the world. The smell of rain on pavement, a friend who listens without judgment, These aren't trivial, they're evidence that joy exists independent of external validation. When Zeno lost his fortune in a shipwreck, he didn't just rebuild, he founded Stoicism, turning loss into legacy. His happiness wasn't in the cargo he lost, but in the purpose he found. The next time you catch yourself thinking, "I'll be happy when," pause. That promotion, that relationship, that perfect home, they're not the source of contentment. They're just new backdrops for the same internal script. Happiness isn't a destination you reach by accumulating. It's a lens you choose to see through. As Seneca reminded Lucilius, true happiness is to enjoy the present without anxious dependence upon the future. Your mind isn't a passive recipient of joy, it's the architect. Build wisely. Marcus Aurelius wrote in his private journal, "Choose not to be harmed and you won't feel harmed." At first glance, it sounds impossible. How can we simply decide not to feel pain? But the Stoics weren't suggesting we ignore reality. They were revealing a profound truth. Suffering isn't created by events themselves, but by the judgments we layer onto them. Think about a traffic jam. The cars aren't inherently tragic or malicious, they're just metal boxes on asphalt. The frustration comes when we attach a story. "This shouldn't be happening. Now I'll be late, my whole day is ruined." That narrative is where the suffering takes root. Consider two people stuck in the same gridlock. One grips the wheel, muttering about incompetent drivers and wasted time. The other turns on a podcast, enjoys the chance to pause, even notices sunlight filtering through the trees. Same situation, radically different experiences. The difference, not the traffic, but the meaning assigned to it. Epictetus, who endured slavery before becoming a philosopher, put it bluntly, "Men are disturbed not by things, but by the views they take of them." A rainy day isn't bad unless you planned a picnic. A flat tire isn't a catastrophe unless you interpret it as one. This isn't about positive thinking or forced optimism. It's about recognizing that our initial interpretations are often automatic and often wrong. Neuroscience shows that the brain's amygdala reacts to perceived threats before the rational cortex can intervene. That split-second judgment, "This is terrible," triggers a stress response, but Stoicism teaches us to insert a pause between event and reaction, to ask, "Is this truly harmful or just inconvenient?" A cancelled flight might mean missing a meeting, or it might gift you unexpected hours to read or reflect. The event doesn't change, your framing does. History offers striking examples. When Thomas Edison's lab burned down, destroying years of work, he didn't collapse in despair. He famously said, "All our mistakes are burned up. Now we can start fresh." The flames were the same. His judgment transformed them from disaster to opportunity. Similarly, when the Stoic philosopher Seneca was exiled to Corsica, a punishment that would break most, he wrote, "A wise man is content with his lot, whatever it may be, without wishing for what he has not." Exile didn't become suffering until he resisted it. So here's the challenge. Pick one problem in your life right now. A difficult coworker, a financial setback, a noisy neighbor, and strip away the judgment. Not to deny the inconvenience, but to see it neutrally. That coworker isn't toxic. They're acting from their own unresolved pain. The tight budget isn't unfair. It's a constraint that demands creativity. As Marcus Aurelius reminded himself, the universe is change. Our life is what our thoughts make it. The event is just clay. You're the sculptor. What will you shape it into? Seneca's piercing words cut through the noise of modern life like a blade through fog. The whole future lies in uncertainty. Live now. This wasn't just poetic advice. It was a Stoic prescription for a life unshackled from regret and anxiety. Consider how often we treat the present as a waiting room, staring at our phones, counting down to weekends, vacations, or some mythical someday when life will really begin. Meanwhile, the moments that make up our actual existence slip by unnoticed. The Stoics didn't just preach mindfulness, they practiced it as a form of mental sovereignty. Marcus Aurelius would remind himself, concentrate every minute on doing what's in front of you with precise and genuine seriousness. Not because the task was monumental, but because the act of full attention was itself a rebellion against the chaos of distraction. Multitasking, that modern badge of productivity, would have baffled the Stoics. Research shows that switching between tasks can reduce efficiency by up to 40%, but the greater cost is the fragmentation of our awareness. Eating while scrolling, listening half-heartedly in conversations, planning tomorrow's meetings during today's sunset, these aren't efficiencies, they're surrenders. Epictetus warned, if you seek truth, be prepared to let go of distractions. Imagine a blacksmith trying to forge a blade while simultaneously weaving a tapestry. Both crafts would suffer, yet we fracture our attention daily, then wonder why life feels thin. Here's the radical Stoic proposition: the present isn't just all you have, it's enough. When you fully inhabit a conversation, the speaker feels heard in a way no emoji can replicate. When you savor a meal without screens, flavors deepen. Even mundane acts, folding laundry, walking the dog, become meditations when done with undivided attention. The Japanese call this ikigo iki, one time, one meeting, the understanding that each moment is irreplaceable. The Stoics anticipated this centuries earlier. Seneca observed, "We are not given a short life, but we make it short by wasting time." So here's your challenge: carve out 10 minutes today, just 10, to do one thing with total presence. Drink your coffee without checking notifications. Listen to a friend without mentally drafting your response. Feel the weight of your footsteps on pavement. No grand gestures, no life-altering revelations required. Just practice the art of showing up fully to your own existence. As you do, you'll uncover a paradox. The more you anchor yourself in the now, the richer time becomes. Not because it stretches, but because you stop letting it leak through your fingers. The future may be uncertain, but this breath, this heartbeat, this is where life is lived. And it's waiting for you to notice. Diogenes the Cynic, one of Stoicism's most colorful influences, lived in a barrel, literally. When Alexander the Great, the most powerful man in the world, came to visit him and asked if he wanted anything, Diogenes simply replied, "Yes, stand out of my sunlight." This wasn't just a cheeky retort, it was a masterclass in Stoic minimalism. While kings chased conquests and palaces, Diogenes proved that true freedom isn't found in accumulation, but in liberation from desire. The Stoics didn't just admire this simplicity, they built it into their philosophy as a path to clarity and resilience. Seneca, despite his wealth, wrote, "It is not the man who has too little who is poor, but the one who craves more." That craving, not the lack of possessions, is the real prison. Fast forward to today, and you'll see Diogenes' spirit alive in the tiny house movement. People trading sprawling mortgages for 400 square feet of intentional living aren't just downsizing, they're reclaiming autonomy. Every item they choose not to own is a decision they no longer have to make, a bill they don't have to pay, a weight they don't have to carry. This isn't about deprivation, it's about distillation. Like a sculptor chipping away marble to reveal the statue within, Stoic minimalism strips away the non-essential to uncover what actually matters. Marcus Aurelius, ruling an empire, slept on a simple cot, reminding himself, very little is needed to make a happy life. The clutter in our homes mirrors the clutter in our mind. A desk buried under papers breeds procrastination. A closet overflowing with unworn clothes fuels decision fatigue. Even digital hoarding, thousands of unread emails, unused apps drains mental bandwidth. The Stoics knew this centuries before Marie Kondo. Physical space shapes mental space. Epictetus taught, freedom isn't secured by filling up on what you desire, but by controlling your desire itself. When you stop chasing more, you start noticing enough. So here's a challenge. Look around your space right now. What's one possession you could let go of? Not the sentimental heirloom or the tool you genuinely use, but the just-in-case item collecting dust, the extra coffee mug, the duplicate charger, the sweater you haven't worn in years. Letting go isn't loss, it's lightness. Every object you release is a vote for freedom from maintenance, from obligation, from the silent tyranny of stuff. The Stoics didn't advocate poverty, they championed intentionality. Whether it's Diogenes in his barrel or a modern minimalist in a tiny home, the message is the same. The less you need, the more room you have to live. Epictetus, the Stoic philosopher who turned personal suffering into timeless wisdom, left us with a razor-sharp truth. It's not what happens to you, but how you respond that matters. At its core, this is a radical reframing of failure, not as a dead end, but as data. Think of Thomas Edison's legendary response when asked about his 1,000 failed attempts to invent the light bulb. I didn't fail. I just found 1,000 ways that didn't work. That wasn't just optimism, it was Stoic pragmatism in action. Every misstep was a breadcrumb leading him closer to success because he chose to see it that way. History's greatest innovators share this trait. J.K. Rowling's Harry Potter manuscript was rejected 12 times before finding a publisher. Steve Jobs was fired from the company he founded, only to return and transform Apple into a titan. What separated them from those who gave up? Not talent or luck, but their relationship with failure. The Stoics called this apatheia, not apathy, but the ability to experience setbacks without being emotionally derailed. Imagine two entrepreneurs whose startups collapse. One sees it as proof they're unfit for business. The other dissects the failure, extracting lessons about market timing or team dynamics. Same event, divergent trajectories. Here's the uncomfortable truth. Failure only becomes fatal when we interpret it as final. A study of elite athletes found that what distinguished champions wasn't their win rate, but their capacity to analyze losses without self-flagellation. A gymnast who falls during a routine doesn't quit. She reviews the footage, identifies the flawed technique, and drills it relentlessly. The Stoics practiced this same analytical detachment. Seneca wrote, "Difficulties strengthen the mind as labor does the body. Each stumble is a rep for your resilience, so let's make this personal. Think of a failure that stung, a rejected proposal, a botched presentation, a relationship that crumbled. Now ask, what did it teach you about your assumptions, your preparation, or your boundaries? Maybe that missed promotion revealed gaps in your leadership skills. That awkward public speech highlighted the need for better rehearsal. Even heartbreak can be a masterclass in emotional intelligence. The key isn't to avoid falling, it's to learn how to land." Consider the Japanese art of kintsugi, where broken pottery is repaired with gold lacquer, making the fractures more beautiful than the original. That's the Stoic approach to failure, not hiding the cracks, but illuminating them as part of your story. Every time life knocks you down, you're being handed a chisel, one that can carve you into someone wiser, stronger, and more nuanced than before. The question isn't whether you'll fail. It's whether you'll let the failure refine you or define you. Marcus Aurelius warned in his private writings, "When you wake up in the morning, tell yourself, the people I deal with today will be meddling, ungrateful, arrogant, dishonest, jealous, and surly. But I cannot be angry with them or hate them, for we exist to work together." Hidden in that insight is a Stoic antidote to gossip, recognizing that tearing others down fractures the very unity we're meant to build. Gossip isn't just idle chatter, it's a slow poison for the soul. Every time we dissect someone's flaws in their absence, we train our minds to see people as collections of faults rather than fellow travelers. The energy spent speculating about a co-worker's promotion or a neighbor's divorce could be channeled into mastering our own craft or deepening meaningful relationships. Consider how gossip operates like counterfeit currency. It creates the illusion of connection without real value. Two colleagues bond over mocking a third's presentation style, but that momentary solidarity leaves both emptier than before. Contrast this with conversations that spark growth, discussing an inspiring book, debating ideas without attacking people, or sharing hard-won lessons from failure. The difference isn't just topic choice, it's intentionality. Stoics practiced prosouch mindful attention to their mental diet. Just as they avoided indulging in rich foods to maintain physical health, they avoided indulging in toxic speech to preserve moral clarity. Gossip also warps our perception of control. When we fixate on others' choices, their relationships, spending habits, or career moves, we're investing energy in what Epictetus called another's province. The barrister's love life, the cousin's financial decisions, the celebrity's scandal, none are within our sphere of influence, yet by dwelling on them, we starve our own potential. Seneca observed that busybodies are often the least fulfilled because scrutinizing others' paths leaves no time to walk their own. Here's the challenge: for 24 hours, monitor your speech. Not to police every word, but to notice how often do your conversations center on absent third parties. Could you redirect that energy into discussing ideas, solutions, or shared experiences? When you catch yourself sliding into critique, pause and ask, does this serve anyone's growth? The Stoics didn't demand silence but discernment. As Marcus Aurelius wrote, what's not good for the hive isn't good for the bee. Your words shape not just your relationships but your very character. Choose ones that leave you and those around you stronger. Seneca sliced through a common misconception with one razor-sharp sentence: bravery isn't the absence of fear, but action despite it. That distinction changes everything. We often wait for fear to vanish before we act, to feel confident before asking for a raise, to stop trembling before stepping on stage, to be certain before launching a dream. But courage isn't magic that erases fear. It's the stubborn decision to move forward even when your hands shake. Think of a firefighter charging into a burning building. Do you imagine they're fearless? Their training isn't about eliminating terror. It's about mastering the skill of functioning alongside it, letting the adrenaline sharpen rather than paralyze them. History's most courageous figures weren't immune to dread. They were intimately acquainted with it. Take Harriet Tubman, who escaped slavery only to return 19 times via the Underground Railroad, guiding others to freedom. Every journey risked capture, torture, or death. In her own words, I was free, but there was no one to welcome me to the land of freedom. I was a stranger in a strange land. That's the essence of courage, not the absence of fear, but the presence of a purpose so compelling it outweighs the terror. Tubman didn't wait for fear to disappear. She carried it with her like a shadow, refusing to let it dictate her path. Modern life serves up subtler but equally potent tests of courage. That knot in your stomach before pitching an unconventional idea at work, the dryness in your throat before telling someone you love them. Those aren't signs you're doing it wrong, they're proof you're doing something that matters. Studies on performance anxiety reveal a fascinating truth. Seasoned musicians and athletes still get nervous before big moments. The difference: they've learned to interpret those jitters as excitement rather than threats, redirecting the energy into focus. The Stoics called this metathesis the art of redefining experiences. Fear of public speaking becomes my body preparing to communicate. Nerves before a career leap transform into evidence this opportunity is meaningful. So here's the challenge. Identify one fear you've been allowing to call the shots. Maybe it's the hesitation to negotiate a salary because you're afraid of appearing greedy. Or the reluctance to join a community class because you might look inexperienced. Now ask, what would change if you treated fear not as a stop sign, but as a landmark on the road to growth? Epictetus, who faced disability and enslavement, offered this compass. First say to yourself what you would be, and then do what you have to do. Courage isn't a feeling you wait for, it's a choice you make, one trembling step at a time. The firefighter, the freedom fighter, the quiet hero in your own story, they all share one truth. Bravery isn't the absence of the storm, it's the determination to sail anyway. Marcus Aurelius often walked the palace gardens at dawn, observing how leaves unfurled without hurry and birds sang without seeking applause. In his private writings, he marveled at nature's quiet wisdom. Look deeply into nature, and then you will understand everything better. The Stoics didn't just admire the natural world, they saw it as the ultimate blueprint for living. Their concept of physics wasn't just about stars and storms. It was about recognizing that human flourishing comes from aligning with the same principles that govern tides and oak trees' acceptance of change, adaptation to circumstance, and trust in cycles larger than ourselves. Consider how effortlessly nature embraces impermanence. Trees don't resist autumn's stripping of their leaves. They conserve energy for spring's rebirth. Rivers carve canyons not through force but persistent flow. Even earthquakes and forest fires, seemingly destructive, renew ecosystems by clearing space for new growth. The Stoics called this sympatheia the interconnectedness of all things. When we fight life's winters instead of preparing for them, we exhaust ourselves against realities as immutable as gravity. But when we study nature's rhythms, we find a masterclass in resilience. A farmer doesn't curse drought, they dig deeper wells. Modern science now confirms this ancient intuition. Biomimicry design inspired by nature has given us everything from Velcro modeled on burrs to wind turbines shaped like whale fins. But the deepest lessons aren't technological, they're psychological. Ant colonies demonstrate decentralized problem solving. No single ant directs traffic, yet their collective intelligence builds thriving cities. Bamboo teaches the power of flexibility. Its hollow stems bend in typhoons where rigid oaks snap. Even the humble dandelion pushes through cracks in concrete, proving that constraints often reveal creativity. So here's a challenge: step outside and observe. Watch how squirrels stash acorns without guarantee of winter. Notice how vines find sunlight even in dense shade. Then ask, where in your life are you resisting natural cycles? Clinging to a relationship that's run its course, fighting aging instead of embracing its wisdom. The Stoics practiced Amor Fati, loving fate not as passive surrender, but as active collaboration with reality's currents. Nature never wastes energy raging against what is. It adapts and thrives within it. Next time you face a setback, channel the stoicism of a shoreline enduring waves, not by becoming impervious, but by learning when to stand firm and when to reshape. As Seneca wrote while recovering from illness, the body must be given time to heal, just as the earth must be allowed to lie fallow. Your struggles aren't interruptions to your journey, they're part of your ecosystem. And ecosystems, when honored, find balance. Epictetus sliced through our obsession with speed with one timeless truth: no great thing is created suddenly. That simple phrase dismantles the entire mythology of overnight success, the viral sensations. the lottery winners, the flash-in-the-pan influencers we're conditioned to envy. But here's what we forget: an acorn doesn't fret because it's not an oak by Tuesday. It doesn't compare itself to the fern growing faster nearby. It simply digs its roots deep, draws nutrients from seasons of rain and drought, and becomes what it's meant to be, not on our timeline, but on nature's. The Stoics didn't just preach patience, they reframed it as strategic endurance, the quiet might that outlasts every shortcut. Modern impatience isn't just a bad habit, it's a cultural delusion. We binge entire TV seasons in a weekend, yet abandon hobbies that don't yield mastery in a month. We chase crash diets instead of sustainable health, viral fame instead of lasting craft. Even our language betrays us. We hack productivity, disrupt industries, and demand life-changing results in just 30 days. But real growth operates on a different clock. Michelangelo spent 4 years flat on his back painting the Sistine Chapel ceiling. Beethoven composed his Ninth Symphony while completely deaf. These weren't sprints, they were marathons run inch by stubborn inch. Consider the oak tree analogy. Above ground, progress seems glacial, barely a foot of growth per year. But underground, a sapling's roots stretch twice as deep as its height, building an anchor that will let it weather centuries of storms. The Stoics saw human potential the same way. Seneca wrote, "Time heals what reason cannot, not passive waiting but active ripening." A winemaker doesn't stomp grapes and demand vintage quality wine by sunset. They trust the alchemy of time, knowing acidity will mellow and flavors deepen precisely because they refuse to rush. So here's the challenge: pick one long-term goal you've been approaching with impatience. Maybe it's learning a language where you're frustrated you're not fluent after 3 months of apps, or building a business disheartened because revenue hasn't doubled quarterly. Now ask, what if you measured progress like an oak, not by visible height but by unseen resilience? The Mandarin character for patience combines blade and heart, reminding us that true endurance isn't passive waiting, but the daily sharpening required to cut through resistance. History's most enduring creations, whether Gothic cathedrals, classical symphonies, or meaningful relationships, share one trait. They were built by people who traded the rush of immediacy for the quiet power of persistence. As Marcus Aurelius reflected, the universe is change, our life is what our thoughts make it. Your greatest work isn't behind you or ahead of you, it's in the patient accumulation of today's effort, however small. The oak doesn't apologize for its slow growth, neither should you. Your mind is a garden, leave it untended, and weeds will take over. The Stoics understood this centuries ago, recognizing that negative thoughts, left unchecked, spread like invasive plants, choking out clarity and peace. Marcus Aurelius, the philosopher-emperor, tended his mental garden daily, writing, "Your mind will take the shape of what you frequently hold in thought." That isn't just poetic advice, it's a warning. Every complaint you rehearse, every resentment you water, every fear you fertilize grows stronger roots. Consider how easily a single anxious thought, "What if I fail?" multiplies into a thicket of self-doubt, or how replaying an argument in your head lets anger recede itself. Modern neuroscience confirms this. Repetitive negative thinking strengthens neural pathways, making pessimism a default setting. But here's the Stoic countermove. Just as a gardener pulls weeds before they flower, you can uproot destructive thoughts before they dominate your mental landscape. Take the practice of prosouch Stoic mindfulness. It's not about suppressing emotions but spotting them early, like recognizing a weed's first sprouts. Imagine catching yourself thinking, "My colleague ignored me. They must dislike me." That's a weed. The Stoic response, interrogate it. Is that true? Could they just be distracted? Epictetus taught, Don't let the force of an impression carry you away. By questioning knee-jerk judgments, you starve the weeds of oxygen. History's most resilient figures mastered this discipline. Nelson Mandela, imprisoned for 27 years, refused to let bitterness root. Instead, he studied his captor's language and psychology, transforming resentment into understanding. "Resentment is like drinking poison," he said, echoing the Stoics, "and then hoping it will kill your enemies." Every day, he tended his mental garden, choosing compassion over hatred, not because it was easy, but because he knew what would grow if he didn't. So here's your challenge. Walk through your mind like a gardener with a trowel. What invasive thoughts have you been tolerating? Maybe it's the "I'm not good enough" that creeps in before presentations, or the "they have it easier" that sprouts when comparing yourself to others. Label them, not to judge, but to act. Write them down, then counter each with a Stoic truth. "I control my effort, not outcomes or comparison is the thief of joy." The garden metaphor holds a final wisdom. Growth takes time. You wouldn't yell at a seedling for not bearing fruit overnight. Why berate yourself for not mastering your mind in a week? Tend it daily, prune negativity, plant gratitude, and trust the process. As Seneca wrote, "No one is born wise, but with consistent care, even the most tangled mental thicket can become a sanctuary of clarity." The weeds will always return. Your power lies in spotting them before they take hold. Seneca once observed that a gem cannot be polished without friction. But here's what he didn't say. The moment you compare your raw stone to someone else's finished jewel, you rob yourself of the joy in your own shaping. Comparison doesn't just distract from progress, it distorts reality. Think about scrolling through social media, where every post is a highlight reel: vacation sunsets, career wins, picture-perfect relationships, while you're sitting in sweatpants grappling with everyday messiness. The Stoics saw this trap centuries before Instagram. Measuring your unedited life against someone else's curated masterpiece is a recipe for quiet despair. Consider the absurdity of comparing your chapter 1 to someone else's chapter 20. A novice guitarist hearing a virtuoso might quit in frustration, never realizing that maestro once fumbled the same chords. A young writer discarding their draft because it doesn't read like Hemingway's final edit is like uprooting a seedling for not being a tree. Even nature rejects this logic. Redwoods don't resent sequoias for growing taller, they stretch toward their own light. Marcus Aurelius wrestled with this, reminding himself, "What is it that you yourself wish to be? When you've answered that, go after it without hesitation." Not what others have achieved, what you aspire to become. Modern psychology confirms the toll of comparison. Studies show that frequent social media use correlates with depression, not because others' successes diminish yours, but because the brain struggles to separate curated illusions from reality. That friend's overnight success likely involved years of unseen setbacks. The influencer's perfect day excludes tantrums, bills, and insecurities. The Stoics practiced autarkeia, self-sufficiency, not to isolate themselves, but to anchor their worth in internal standards. Epictetus, born into slavery, put it bluntly, "If you wish not to be harmed, don't take the injury." Every time you measure yourself against external benchmarks, you hand others a stick to beat you with. Here's the antidote: spotlight your unique strengths. Maybe you're not the fastest runner in your group, but your consistency inspires others. Your art might not hang in galleries yet, but your creative courage is its own masterpiece. Even Stoic giants had flaws. Seneca battled greed despite preaching simplicity. Marcus Aurelius lost his temper despite valuing patience. Their journals weren't monuments to perfection, they were maps of progress. So pause and ask, what's one strength you possess that no one can replicate? Perhaps it's your ability to listen deeply, turning conversations into sacred spaces. Or your resilience, the way you've turned past failures into stepping stones. Even your quirks, the odd laugh, the peculiar hobby are brushstrokes in a self-portrait no one else can paint. Comparison shrinks the world into a competition. Gratitude expands it into a collaboration. As Seneca wrote, "Enjoy present pleasures so as not to depend on future ones." Your journey isn't lacking, it's unfolding, and the polish that comes with time, friction, and the refusal to mistake someone else's shine for your own. Epictetus sliced through the pretense of intellectualism with one razor-sharp truth. It's not what you know, but what you do. That distinction separates the armchair philosopher from the true Stoic. The difference between someone who can quote Marcus Aurelius at dinner parties and someone who actually lives by his principles when life throws a punch. Think about how often we mistake consumption for growth, reading stacks of self-help books, listening to podcasts on wisdom, collecting quotes like trophies, all while our daily actions remain unchanged. The Stoics weren't impressed by library shelves groaning with unapplied knowledge. They measured wisdom in scars earned, challenges met, and character forged. Consider two students of Stoicism. One can debate the nuances of Seneca's letters but crumbles when criticized at work. The other may stumble over Greek terms but responds to setbacks with unshakable equanimity. Which one truly embodies philosophy? Zeno, the founder of Stoicism, didn't just teach under a painted porch in Athens. He lived the principles he preached, wearing thin robes in winter to master discomfort and engaging with critics without defensiveness. His classroom wasn't a lecture hall, it was his life. Modern psychology echoes this. Studies on habit formation reveal that knowledge alone accounts for barely 10% of behavioral change. The other 90%, consistent action. Journaling was the Stoics' secret weapon for bridging this gap. Marcus Aurelius' Meditations wasn't written for publication. It was his private workshop for hammering raw insights into daily practice. Each entry forced him to confront the distance between his ideals and his impulses. Did I act with courage today? Where did fear override reason? Seneca did the same through letters to friends, dissecting his flaws with surgical honesty. Their journals weren't diaries, they were training grounds. Here's the challenge: pick one Stoic principle you've intellectually admired but haven't fully lived. Maybe it's the dichotomy of control, so easy to grasp, so hard to implement when traffic snarls or plans collapse. Or Amor Fati, loving fate when you're passed over for a promotion. Now craft a single actionable step tonight. I'll write about 3 things outside my control today and how I responded. Or I'll reframe one setback as a hidden opportunity. Wisdom isn't measured in what you highlight in a book. It's in the ink that stains your hands when you put it to work. The Stoics knew that ideas untested by life are like swords never drawn. They may gleam impressively on the wall, but they'll fail you in battle. So ask yourself, what's one truth you'll stop admiring from a distance and start wielding today? Not tomorrow, not someday, now. Because as Epictetus warned, if you didn't learn these things in order to practice them, what did you learn them for? The world doesn't need more scholars of virtue. It needs more living examples. Marcus Aurelius, the philosopher-emperor who commanded legions, left a simple but profound truth in his private writings. What's bad for the hive is bad for the bee. At first glance, it might sound like poetic idealism until you realize this was the bedrock of Stoic cosmopolitanism, the radical idea that we're all threads in the same human tapestry. The Stoics didn't just preach kindness as a moral duty, they saw it as a strategic necessity, as vital to societal survival as roots to a tree. Think about it. A single act of cruelty ripples outward, poisoning trust and cooperation. while kindness, especially when unexpected, tightens the invisible bonds that hold communities together. Take the modern example of a volunteer cleaning up a park anonymously. They're not just picking up trash, they're sending a silent message: this space matters. We belong to each other. Studies in behavioral science confirm this ripple effect. When people witness acts of generosity, they're significantly more likely to pay it forward. The Stoics anticipated this centuries before random acts of kindness became a hashtag. Seneca wrote, "Wherever there is a human being, there is an opportunity for kindness." Not because it's saintly, but because it's practical. A team that uplifts its weakest member becomes stronger. A neighborhood where people shovel each other's snow outlasts every storm. But here's where Stoic kindness diverges from sentimental virtue signaling. It's not about performative charity or waiting for applause. It's about recognizing that helping others is helping yourself. Epictetus, who endured slavery, taught that true freedom comes from serving something larger than your ego. Consider the business owner who mentors a struggling competitor. Short term, it might seem counterintuitive until you realize that raising the tide lifts all boats, or the soldier who shares rations with a wounded enemy, knowing that mercy today might spare brutality tomorrow. Kindness isn't naivety, it's the ultimate long game. So here's your challenge: perform one anonymous act of kindness this week. Not for social media or even gratitude, just to realign your compass toward interconnectedness. Pay for a stranger's coffee and leave before they can thank you. Leave a book on a bench with a note for whoever needs this today. The anonymity is key. It strips away the ego's craving for recognition, leaving pure service. As Marcus Aurelius reminded himself, you exist as part of a whole. Every small act of kindness is a stitch repairing that whole, one thread at a time. And in that repair, you'll find a paradox: the less credit you take, the more strength you gain. Epictetus, the Stoic philosopher born into slavery, delivered a truth so potent it echoes across millennia. While you may chain my leg, even Zeus cannot overpower my will. Picture him in shackles, his body owned but his mind unshackled. A living testament that freedom isn't the absence of constraints, but the sovereignty to choose your response to them. This wasn't theoretical bravado. It was a radical declaration. The walls of any prison, literal or metaphorical, are only as thick as your perception of them. Modern psychology confirms this ancient insight. Studies on prisoners of war reveal that those who cultivated inner resilience through routines, mental exercises, or finding meaning in suffering, not only survived with less trauma, but often emerged more resilient than their free but despairing counterparts. Viktor Frankl, the psychiatrist who survived Auschwitz, embodied this Stoic principle in the 20th century's darkest hour. Starving, freezing, and surrounded by death, he observed a profound divergence among prisoners. Some collapsed into hopelessness, while others, despite identical conditions, found purpose in sharing crusts of bread, comforting the dying, or even secretly mocking their captors through gallows humor. Frankl wrote, "Everything can be taken from a man but one thing, the last of the human freedoms, to choose one's attitude in any given set of circumstances." His captors controlled his body, but his mind remained his own. Like Epictetus, he proved that tyranny's ultimate failure isn't political, it's psychological. Consider where this applies in your life right now. Maybe it's a job that feels stifling, a relationship that drains you, or societal expectations that chafe. The Stoics would ask, what aspects of this situation are truly chains, and which are simply the stories you've wrapped around yourself? A teacher trapped in a bureaucratic education system might lament their lack of creative freedom, or they might focus on the one student whose eyes light up during lessons, turning their classroom into a sanctuary of curiosity. An entrepreneur facing bankruptcy could spiral into shame or mine the experience for lessons that will forge a wiser, leaner venture next time. Here's the liberating paradox. The more you focus on what you can control, your effort, your honesty, your willingness to learn, the less power external circumstances hold over you. Like a tree bending in a storm, your flexibility becomes your strength. The next time you feel trapped, ask yourself, where is the key already in my hand? It might be the choice to walk away from toxic dynamics, to redefine success on your own terms, or simply to stop begging for validation from people whose opinions don't nourish you. Freedom isn't a place you arrive at, it's a muscle you exercise. Every time you pause before reacting, every time you question inherited assumptions, every time you align your actions with your values despite pressure, you're declaring independence from invisible masters. The Stoics didn't just preach this, they lived it. From Epictetus in chains to Marcus Aurelius on the throne, they proved that no cage is stronger than the mind's ability to transcend it. So look around. What walls have you built in your own mind? And what might happen if you stopped mistaking them for the horizon? Seneca's words cut through time like a knife. Life is long if you know how to use it. But here's the unsettling truth most of us don't. We fritter away years on autopilot, mistaking motion for purpose, mistaking busyness for meaning. The Stoics measured life not in breaths taken, but in moments fully inhabited. Think about it, the average human lives around 4,000 weeks. That's not a typo, weeks, not years, weeks, and yet, how many do we squander on resentment, distraction, or waiting for some mythical someday when conditions will finally be perfect? Consider the last time you postponed something important. Maybe it was that trip you've been meaning to take, the business idea you've been too afraid to launch, or the conversation you've been avoiding with someone you love. Now imagine a chilling twist. What if this were your final year, not as a morbid hypothetical, but as a clarifying lens? Would you still tolerate that toxic job? Would you still mute your true opinions to keep the peace? Would you still sacrifice mornings to mindless scrolling? The Stoics called this Memento Mori, remembering death, not to paralyze you with fear, but to electrify you with focus. History's most impactful figures lived with this urgency. Steve Jobs, facing a terminal diagnosis, famously said, "Remembering that I'll be dead soon is the most important tool I've ever encountered to help me make the big choices in life." Rachel Carson, dying of cancer, raced to finish Silent Spring, igniting the environmental movement. Their power wasn't in having more time, it was in refusing to waste a grain of what they had. The Stoics understood this 2,000 years earlier. Seneca wrote, "You act like mortals in all that you fear, and like immortals in all that you desire." We fear risk as if we'll live forever, yet postpone joy as if we'll get a do-over. Here's the pivot point. Wisdom isn't just knowing these truths, it's acting on them. You've just absorbed 30 Stoic principles that can reshape your resilience, your relationships, and your peace of mind. But if they stay as words on a screen, they're as useful as a gym membership you never use. So let's make this visceral. Grab a pen right now and answer this. If the next 12 months were all you had left, what 3 things would you stop tolerating? What 2 dreams would you finally pursue? And who is one person you'd make sure knows how much they mean to you? The clock isn't just ticking, it's thundering. Not to rush you into panic, but to jolt you into alignment. Every great philosophy, every spiritual tradition, every deathbed epiphany echoes the same message. Life's shortness isn't its flaw, it's its fire. The deadline is what makes the work matter. The expiration date is what makes the meal sacred. So don't just nod along and move on. Act. Start small if you must cancel one pointless commitment today. Have one uncomfortable truth-telling conversation this week, but start because Seneca's long life isn't about stretching time, it's about deepening it. And that begins the moment you decide to stop waiting for permission to live. We've journeyed through 30 Stoic truths that have weathered centuries, principles that shaped emperors, guided warriors, and still transform lives today. But here's the heart of it. Stoicism isn't a philosophy to admire from a distance. It's a forge where resilience is hammered out daily, one choice at a time. Think of these truths not as quotes to bookmark, but as tools to grip tightly when life's storms hit. That traffic jam that tests your patience, that's your training ground for the dichotomy of control. The criticism that stings, that's your chance to practice separating fact from interpretation. Even the small frustrations, the burnt toast, the missed call are opportunities to exercise your Stoic muscles. Marcus Aurelius, the philosopher king who ruled Rome's vast empire, left us a challenge sharper than any sword. Waste no more time arguing what a good man should be one. No more waiting for perfect conditions. No more postponing growth until you've read one more book or attended one more seminar. The moment to act is now. So here's your mission. Pick one truth from these 30 that resonates most deeply, the one that prickles your conscience or stirs a quiet, "I needed to hear this," in your chest. Maybe it's Amor, Fati, loving your fate when faced with a setback, or practicing voluntary discomfort to break dependency on convenience. It could be as simple as pausing before reacting to a provocation, creating space between stimulus and response. This isn't about overhauling your life overnight. It's about starting where you stand. The Stoics didn't build Rome in a day. They laid one brick at a time, each choice a testament to their principles. Your journey is no different. Every time you choose courage over comfort, clarity over complaint, you're not just studying Stoicism, you're living it. If this wisdom has sparked something in you, don't let it fade. Hit subscribe to dive deeper into timeless principles that cut through modern chaos, and drop a comment below. Which truth will you put into practice today? Your words might just inspire someone else to begin their own Stoic journey. Remember, the measure of philosophy isn't in what you know, it's in who you become. The clock is ticking. Your next move, that's where the real transformation begins.